Hi there, I'm Cliff Mims, and this is Talking Ed. This week I'm talking with TJ and Lenny about some of their research in flipped learning. So, hey guys.
Hi.
Hi, everyone.
And let's start with Lenny. This interview came about because of a recent publication this team had published about flipped learning, and so I found it interesting. Lenny, you're first author, so would you take a few moments and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Cliff. My name is Lenny. I was previously a high school math teacher in Chicago Public Schools. So I taught Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 to freshmen and juniors. And really the work that we're talking about today is sort of birthed out of some of the struggles and challenges that we faced in the classroom closer to the end of my tenure teaching there.
And TJ, introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm TJ Kopcha. I am an associate professor of learning design and technology at the University of Georgia. Lenny is my doc student, and yeah, he came to me with this problem and some information, some data that came out of it, and we were able to write a nice piece about it and learn a lot about flipped learning.
Okay. Is this weed eater coming through on my audio? Good.
Yeah.
All right. We'll start with you, Lenny. Would you give us a little bit of information about the setting for, I think this is back when you were teaching in Chicago, so give us a little bit about the setting, but also the problem, the need, and why you embraced the flipped model.
Sure. Well, in Chicago, our school had actually adopted a new grading system called mastery grading, and maybe the easiest way to describe mastery grading is kids go through certain benchmarks throughout the year. Once they check off a benchmark, they're sort of done with it. But it was a really new grading system for us as a cohort, us as Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 teachers. So we were sort of wading through the water, looking through some of the challenges, and some of the things that started coming up were, well, we were in Chicago Public Schools, and one of the issues with our school in particular was truancy and a lot of students that were absent. So we have this challenge of a lot of students being absent in our schools with this new grading system where we have to teach a certain pace throughout the year, which was somewhat sort of rigid, or once you pass a certain benchmark, you typically wouldn't go to review the benchmark anymore. So once you have these two problems colliding, a new mastery system grading with a lot of kids absent and then coming back to school, it sort of created a problem for us where students may miss a few weeks in September, and then we're looking at them in October, and they're wanting to catch up, but you're only one person as a teacher. How are you going to teach students who miss so much school? So really what we started to do is address the problem organically with technology. So what we did is I started creating some of these videos, recap videos online of previously covered benchmarks where students can come in, view the material online, and get that initial review, and then come to us with some tutoring needs or the assessment that they would need to take after school.
Okay. What were you using to shoot these videos and to stream these videos?
I think this was back in 2012. I was using iMovie to put it together. And then just putting it up on, there's this site called teachertube.com, which is sort of like YouTube for schools. So they would host all the videos, and they were just public for anyone to see too.
Were you able to do this for the entire school year, or was just say, the last 9 weeks?
This actually, so it started, I actually didn't have the intention of doing this at the beginning of the year. It started because of the problem. So I think the first video I made, in Chicago the school year starts in September, so the first video I made was probably towards the end of October, once I realized that this was an issue. And once I saw the success of it and more kids starting to view it, it became like a running classroom behind the classroom that actually ran up until the end of June, where the school year was done.
Okay, very good. TJ, lot of people ask me, and you teach similar classes as well. A lot of people frequently are asking me, "What is flipped learning?" So I'm going to pose that question to you. When your students ask you, or when you're doing professional development, what is your response? And I'm going to be listening and taking notes, because there's not an easy response to that question, I don't believe.
Yeah, you're right about that. There is not an easy response. So, I mean, I think the essence of flipped learning is that, just like Lenny had mentioned earlier, you use technology to offload some of what normally happens in the face-to-face part of the classroom, so that you can do more face-to-face, and other things are happening behind the scenes or at home or wherever it is. But I think the traditional, if there is a traditional, but I think the more pervasive view of flipped learning right now is that it's a lecture that happens offline, not in the classroom, so that when you're in the classroom, you can be doing other things, whether it's reinforcing some basic skills or diving deeper into problem solving or some other, more hands-on collaborative activities and things like that, but it frees up the time to do that. What intrigued me about Lenny's work and what he was doing was it didn't fit that pervasive idea of what flipped learning was. Like he described, it was more of this additional layer that really created a solid learning environment for his students, where they could have access to their teacher both in the classroom and at home.
So flipped learning can be doing your homework at school, but doing your schoolwork at home, because that's the definition I keep hearing. So it can be, but the two of you learned that it can be so much more. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. And Lenny, would you tell us? I'd be curious to hear, a story or two related to your experience there in Chicago.
Right. Well, one thing that I didn't mention before was we did offer after-school tutoring. So it was available for students after school, but typically in Chicago, in our area, the students have other responsibilities. So they might not be able to make that window of 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock p.m. right after school to attend these tutoring sessions. Because they have other responsibilities like picking up their siblings from school, maybe even babysitting, a part-time job that they would have to attend. So getting them to fit into this system of, I'm offering this tutoring after school, can you make it? It wasn't always feasible for every student. So I remember one of the students that we actually got a great relationship in the middle of the year, but closer to the beginning of the year, she was just very truant. So she would miss maybe a week or two of school at a time, then come back to school. In the meantime, in the classroom, we had already covered maybe 5 to 7 benchmarks at that point. So she would come to the classroom wanting to learn, and she really was a really smart, bright kid. She wanted to learn, but we were just we're past that benchmark. So I wouldn't be able to review in the middle of class. And ironically, she was available. She was one of the students that was available after school. So she would come to these after-school tutoring sessions, and she would actually want me to stay in the library well after 5 o'clock, maybe 6, 7, 8 o'clock, to tutor her one-on-one. And I would engage her some of these times, but it was really infeasible for me to do this every single day. So she wanted to learn, and it really broke my heart that here's a student that wants to learn, that wants to put in the time. But her time is different from this traditional time of coming to first period and coming to these 2-hour sessions after school. So what we started doing is I developed some of these online videos that I had already developed a few of them. And it was really where we had to sit down. And initially she rejected the online videos because she viewed it as not intimate. There's no teacher connection there. And she wanted immediate answers to her questions. So we sort of had to sit down together with the video and really figure out how to successfully go about reviewing with the video on our own, not having every question answered immediately by the tutor. So that really took a couple of videos where I was watching it with her. We would pause it occasionally. I would say, keep your questions, maybe hold on to it until the end. And then after a few of the videos, I started realizing it was offering her a time to get tutored without me having to be there every single day after school. And once she was won over to the fact that I wasn't pawning her off to a computer, it wasn't that I didn't care about her learning. It really was, this was going to be successful to her, and I was trying to show her that. Once she was aware of that, she actually took to the computers, and she would actually watch the videos on her own, sort of autonomously, and then come to me after the fact, say, hey, I watched Benchmark 3, can I take the assessment? So we would do some quick tutoring after the fact. But it really was, there was this initial struggle, and once she realized there was success that could be had from it, she was won over.
Nice. Can either of you think of one more story that really impacted you?
Yeah, I'll chime in, and Lenny set me up really well with what he just said there. You know, I didn't get to know any of the students personally because Lenny was their teacher, but he brought the data to me, so I got to see how they came together with their experience. And one of the things that really struck me, and it builds off of the idea that these are students who right after school have a lot of responsibilities that they really can't shirk, whether it's a part-time job to help feed the family or to take care of siblings or things like that. And I think what struck me was I hear so many teachers make an assumption that not coming to tutoring is a sign that the student is lazy or that the student isn't interested in learning, when the reality is their life is really complicated. And what was happening when I looked at the data was there were students that were looking at these videos at 10, 11 o'clock at night. They wanted to learn. They used the resources once they were provided, but they did need a different option than what is traditionally offered in that traditional school day. And that was profound to me. Like, I think sometimes we don't give students the benefit of the doubt that we just assume they don't want to learn, and the reality is they do. They just don't want to learn the way we think learning ought to happen sometimes.
Wow. Wow. Lenny, do you have anything you want to add to that? I'm still just receiving that. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of, you know, a typical classroom, how I was teaching it. I had 30 different kids in a classroom, I have 150 students, right? And it was not practical for me to assume that every student was going to learn benchmark 7 on this Tuesday. Even though we were doing the system and we were sort of satisfied with it, but it just wasn't practical. I was sitting here looking at faces where they weren't prepared to learn benchmark 7. But I was only one teacher, so we had this struggle with, you know, I have to teach a certain benchmark on a certain day, but there was this like internal heartbreak where I know that maybe 130 of the kids can't handle this benchmark on this day. You know, you can only go so far. You really do care for the kids. If you're a teacher, you care for your kids. So you do want to figure out any solution possible to help them, to empower them to pass that class, to get an understanding of proper learning of what they're supposed to be doing.
Wow. Wow, guys, I'm going to be chewing on that for a while. That's a lot to process. All right, so TJ, your information about the data and the kids chiming are logging in and using the resources at all kinds of hours. That's, like I said, that's a lot to process. It's really powerful. What other takeaways came from your research?
But yeah, I mean, I'll chime in. You know, being a professor and a researcher, I see this tendency for people to want to compare flipped learning to not flipped learning as if it in and of itself should be better. And the real takeaway for me after seeing this is that it in and of itself is a way to create a really strong environment that's full of a lot of different activities, not just this single activity. So I don't know, it got me singing a different tune about flipped learning that, you know, just like before flipped learning became the craze, we try and balance the classroom with a lot of different ways for someone to learn and with a lot of different options. And this is just another option. It just happens to be a highly technical and technological one.
Lenny, did you have another response? It's fine if you don't.
Yeah, I was thinking, it sounds obvious, but we addressed a very tangible need with the community there. The tangible need was we need to sort of diversify how students were going to get access to learning. And then we use technology to meet that tangible need, right? But I think sometimes if we don't start with that problem, what is the problem? So in this case, we knew what the problem was, and then we reached over into our goodie bag of technology to solve the problem, rather than kind of going into it saying, I really want to do flipped learning, and then pushing it on students and faculty, because then there might not be a reason to use it. So I think it had staying power just because it was actually meeting a critical need at that point of time that we really didn't see. If we didn't have technology, I don't know how that need could have been met.
And I'm gonna add one more thing that I think is really important to point out. If it wasn't Lenny in the videos, I don't know if the students would have reacted as positively. I think that it showed a commitment on his part to dedicate the time to make these videos and come up with such a different approach to that problem that many students were facing. I think that's where a connection was made with a lot of them. And so take Khan Academy, for example. They have great resources, but that's not their teacher. This was their teacher who dedicated and devoted himself to the student. And I think that said something to them, and it really helped resonate.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you to tell the story, TJ, because I'm sure he's not going to want to. But off camera, he was telling us about the library and one of his colleagues. Would you share that story with the audience, please?
Yeah, actually, it is kind of funny. So yeah, he was talking about how one of his colleagues came up to him and said, I thought you were teaching in the library because I heard your voice, but then I heard your voice again, but it was a different conversation. Then I heard your voice again, and it was a different conversation. And it turned out that there were a whole bunch of students in a library all watching videos of him, and they were all different videos at different times, and it was like this chorus of Lenny George in the library, which it's just an amusing visual right there.
Yeah. Yeah. So very good, very good. Well, kudos to you, Lenny. It seems like you made tremendous impact in the lives of these young people. So I'm sure they greatly appreciate it, and it's something that will be a benefit to them for a long, long time in the future. So kudos.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great experience, and really just it was satisfying just to see how you can empower kids to learn differently, different times, different ways. But they really took up on that challenge and started learning on their own.
Okay. I think the final question will be this then. What are your practical tips and advice to classroom teachers that might be thinking about flipping learning in their classes or even in their online environments?
I'll start. I think the word Lenny used was organic, and I think that's really important. I think there was a tangible problem, both from the adult perspective as well as the kid perspective, and I think that really helped bring the project to fruition in a way that they all wanted to participate in it, whether it was consuming or producing.
Right, and when I would say, I usually give some advice to teachers even now about maybe flipped learning or aspects of flipped learning. Anything that's new for students it could be difficult. So really staying the course. The first time students pick it up, it's just like any new invention, right? Some kids are going to love it. Some are not going to love it very much. Some are going to hate it. But really, you come in with a very organized, systematic approach and really stay the course. So really show the kids how to be successful in this new kind of environment that may not be it might not be intuitive for them how to be successful in it.
Yeah, and the other thing that struck me is it grew from small to large. So Lenny started with one or two of those benchmarks that were the most needed because those were the students most in need. And I think that's important to remember. This didn't just happen overnight. Like, it took time to make the videos, and there was some thinking and some responsiveness. Make a couple, see what happens. Make a couple, see what happens. So I think it's important to think about start small and then see where it can go.
Any other tips? Any other advice? All right, then. I've enjoyed speaking with both of you. This has been Lenny George and TJ Kopcha. If you'll check the show notes, probably right below this video, you'll see links to their recent article publication, as well as some other resources that I think they may be sharing with us. I'm Cliff Mims, and we've been Talking Ed.